Thank you, Mo and Stacy and Josh and Rachel, and where are my notes? Here we are. I can't tell you how humbled I am to be standing here and receiving this award from Discovering Justice. And I just want to thank John Spack and the whole Discovering Justice organization and all of the co-chairs and the people who helped put this together, including my nephew right there, Brandon Sy, who decorated the room. Everybody had a little piece of the action here, and I want to thank you. I'm especially humbled because I'm being honored on the same stage with a man who happens to be my husband of 33 years come this Friday, who's, I think as Mo said very well, whose entire life has been dedicated to the pursuit of justice. Whether it's in courtrooms or boardrooms or federal or state house conference rooms or living rooms of simple folk who are seeking justice or just seeking to be heard. Deval has stood for justice in every step he has taken, every action he's taken, every position he's held, and in almost every word that he's spoken. I'm very proud of the work that Deval has done, and I am proud to be standing with him here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now, many of you know me as a lawyer. Some of you know me as the former First Lady. Deval, help me, please. Thank you, I need my glasses. Some of you know me as a former First Lady of Massachusetts. And some may know of my advocacy in the area of domestic violence and in efforts to erase the stigma of mental illness. But aside from my family and oldest friends, most of you don't know me as a public school teacher I was in New York City, working with young children, trying to inspire their curiosity, stimulate their minds, and create lifelong learners. Working with young people and watching them mature into responsible and concerned, dynamic young adults who use their gifts to contribute to the betterment of others was my very first aspiration, and it remains my lasting goal. I've never given up on that ambition, and I continue to work to achieve that goal. And this is why Discovering Justice so resonates with me. Discovering Justice concentrates in part on focusing young people on the power of their own voices. That focus is so critical. It's a lesson I learned as a newly minted teacher in New York City. And I want to tell you a brief story about a little boy in one of my classes who had a major impact on my life and my own sense of justice, or rather, my sense of injustice. As a new teacher in the New York City school system, and by the way, Deborah, where are you? I was teaching at the same time your mother was teaching in the New York City public school system, and you're right, it was a different time. As a new teacher, I would be assigned each year to the worst schools in the system, the kind of schools that the most senior teachers couldn't wait to get out of. This was a time 40 years ago when students were still tracked in classes, going from classes filled with children who were perceived as intellectually full and the brightest to those classes who were filled with children who were perceived as intellectually lacking. Inevitably, as a new teacher, I was assigned to the lowest class in the grade. So for example, the second grade classes were numbered starting with 2-1, 2-2, 2-3. I ultimately, inevitably, would be assigned class 215. Now these classes were not full of stupid children, though many thought they were, and they labeled them as such. They were full of children with special needs. Mental, emotional, social needs that were not being met by their schools, by their communities, or by their families. The children in these lower classes were simply being put in classrooms, crowded classrooms of 30 to 40 children with other children the system had given up on. These children should have been assigned the best, the most experienced teachers, not people like me, fresh out of college with no experience in dealing with that population. But that's the way the school assignments worked back then. In my second year of teaching, I was assigned to a school in South Jamaica, a depressed neighborhood, and I was assigned class 2-something in the teens. My students were second graders, but most had been held back at least once. There was one little boy, Tyrone was his name. He had been held back twice, so he was 9, almost 10 in the 2nd grade. And Tyrone was incorrigible. He was angry, he was defiant, he was determined to be miserable and to make everyone around him more miserable than he. He didn't do his work in class or outside of class, and he was a disruption. And he didn't seem to care one bit. And his parents didn't seem to care either. They never showed up for parents' night, they never signed his report cards, and he didn't have a home phone number for me to call when I needed to speak with someone about his work or his behavior. Now, because my entire class was a challenge and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to cope, I came up with an idea of rearranging the desks that were all lined up in neat, straight rows, to grouping the desks into clusters. Now, I know that happens a lot now, but believe me, back then, 40 years ago, that was a novel idea. And I set up a bit of a contest in these clusters. Children were rewarded with points for their homework, for their behavior, for their cleanliness, for their respect for others. And then the clusters would compete for points, and each week the cluster with the highest number of points would be taken by me to McDonald's for lunch. Now, I know that's not a healthy prize, but McDonald's was new at the time and it seemed an attractive enticement, something the kids would work hard for, so that's what I did. And wondrously, it seemed to work. The children had something to motivate them, and mostly they worked hard for their rewards. All except Tyrone. Nothing seemed to work with Tyrone. I tried everything. I threatened him with staying after school. He loved it. I sent notes home to his parents, and I never heard anything back. I took away his liberties, like going to gym or art or music, and told him he had to stay in the classroom with me. He loved that too. And no one wanted Tyrone in their cluster. They knew with Tyrone that they'd never win a trip to McDonald's. So I decided to rotate Tyrone among the groups, but that just exacerbated the problem for him and for everyone else. He seemed to become a curse. No one wanted them in his cluster. So finally I came up with an idea. Tyrone would get his own table, right next to my desk. He was going to be responsible for himself, for his own work, for his own cleanliness, for his own behavior. And for me, he got his own attention and his own praise. And somehow the thought that he alone might win the prize at lunch at McDonald's with me seemed to inspire him, gave him a sense of purpose. So Tyrone began to earn his points. He began to behave and straighten up. And one week, Tyrone won the lunch. He was proud, and so was I. So we went to lunch and we talked, and I told him I wanted to tell his parents how proud I was of him, of his great progress. Tyrone wasn't thrilled with that idea. He said he didn't want me to. I didn't understand, and I pushed back, and he resisted. I said it was really important for his parents to know of his accomplishments, and he shrugged it off. I finally insisted one afternoon that I was going to walk him home, and I did. What I saw when I walked him home stunned me. Home was a truck in which he and his father lived. His father sold fish from the back of the truck by day, and they lived in the truck at night. There was no mother. Tyrone was ashamed. But I too was ashamed. I was ashamed of myself for not seeing this boy's needs and causing him to reveal his needs to me so starkly. I learned a lot that day. I learned a lot about Tyrone and about myself and about the community in which he lived. And I learned just how little I understood the community in which I was working. I learned how little prepared I was to know what to do in this situation and how helpless I felt. I learned how little support the school seemed at the time to be able to offer the children in this community. I learned of the injustice of the school system in which Tyrone and so many others like him were condemned. And I learned that this 9-year-old was in tremendous need. Tyrone and his father needed a great deal of help. Tyrone needed a safe and stable home. He needed nutritious meals and probably medical attention. He needed evaluation of and treatment for his behavioral problems. He needed guidance in understanding how to resolve conflicts. His father needed some intervention to help him meet his obligations to his son. Tyrone needed a boost in his confidence. and self-esteem. He needed to know that he mattered to someone. He needed not to be given up on. He needed a voice, his or someone else's, to speak for him. I think about Tyrone all the time, and I wonder where he is today. I wonder whether a Discovering Justice program, if it existed at the time, might have inspired someone, a student, a teacher, a parent, a volunteer, to recognize that something was not right and to speak up in Tyrone's behalf. I wonder how many students Discovering Justice has empowered to speak for themselves. And I wonder how many students that are empowered by Discovering Justice go on to advocate and ensure that children like Tyrone never have to feel alone, never have to hide their circumstances, never give up on themselves because it feels like everyone else has. So I want to thank Discovering Justice for honoring me tonight, but more importantly, for honoring our future by dedicating its resources and its energies to introducing the simple but powerful concept of justice to a generation of youngsters who now more than ever are going to need it. Thank you.